Jackson was on leave from his job as an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He was appointed as the lead United States prosecutor in Nuremberg by Harry Truman. Jackson didn't attend college and completed only 1 year of law school. He became an attorney by serving an apprenticeship. He served as both Solicitor General and Attorney General before going to the High Court. While other World War II allies originally wanted summary execution of Nazi war criminals, the United States pushed for a trial. Jackson hoped that the proceedings at Nuremberg would create new international law outlawing aggressive warfare. His opening statement ran for the better part of a day and is considered by many to be one of the great pieces of oratory.
I will now call upon the Chief Prosecutor for the United States of America.
The privilege of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated. That four great nations, flushed with victory and stung with injury, stay the hand of vengeance and voluntarily submit their captive enemies to the judgment of the law is one of the most significant tributes that power has ever paid to reason. In the prisoner's dock sit 20-odd broken men, reproached by the humiliation of those they have led almost as bitterly as by the desolation of those they have attacked. Their personal capacity for evil is forever past. It is hard now to perceive in these men as captives the power which, as Nazi leaders, they once dominated most of the world and terrified most of it. Merely as individuals, their fate is of little consequence to the world. What makes this inquest significant is that these prisoners represent sinister influences that will lurk in the world long after their bodies have returned to dust. We will show them to be the living symbols of racial hatreds, terrorism, and of violence, and of the arrogance and cruelty of power.
Martin Bormann, a farmer born in 1900, was since 1933 head of the staff of Rudolf Hess, and during World War II, chief of the party chancellery and the closest advisor of Hitler at the Führer's headquarters. His fate at the end of the war is unknown. Karl Donitz. Karl Donitz was admiral of the fleet and born in 1891. Shortly before Hitler's death on May 2, 1945, he designated Donitz as his successor. Hans Frank was a lawyer born in 1900. He was Governor General of Poland from 1939. Wilhelm Frick was born in 1877. He was the Minister for Internal Affairs. Hans Fritzsch. Hans Fritzsch was a journalist born in 1900 and served as head of the news service section in the press division of the Ministry for Propaganda from May 1933. At trial, he was in a way a substitute for Goebbels, who had committed suicide earlier. Walter Funk was an economic journalist born in 1890 and served as Minister for Economic Affairs, and after 1939 was president of the German Central Bank. Hermann Göring, born in 1893, served as Prussian Minister for Internal Affairs and created the secret police, which later developed into the Gestapo. He was responsible for the mobilization of the economic resources of the Reich for rearmament. Rudolf Hess was born in 1894 and was the Führer's deputy in the NSDAP from 1933 on. On May 10, 1941, he flew on a not yet fully understood mission to Scotland, where he was captured and then interred. Alfred Jodl was a general, and he was born in 1890. He served as head of military command and advisor of Hitler in strategic and operative matters. Ernest Kaltenbrunner. Ernest Kaltenbrunner was a lawyer. He was born in 1903 and was head of the Security Police, the SD. Wilhelm Keitel. Wilhelm Keitel was a general. He was born in 1882 and was Field Marshal of the Army. Robert Ley was a chemist, born in 1890. He eliminated the free labor unions in 1933 and established the rigidly ideological Labor Front. Konstantin von Neurath. Konstantin von Neurath was born in 1873. He was a diplomat since 1908 and was the protector of Bohemia and Moravia from March 1939 to 1943. In 1941, he was removed from service. Franz von Papen. Franz von Papen was born in 1879, was vice-chancellor in the first cabinet of Hitler in 1933, and later served as ambassador in Vienna and Ankara. Erich Raeder was an admiral. He was born in 1876 and was, since 1943, commander-in-chief of the Navy. Joachim von Ribbentrop. Joachim von Ribbentrop was a businessman who was born in 1893 and served as foreign minister from 1938 to 1945. Alfred Rosenberg. Alfred Rosenberg was born in 1893, served as minister for the occupied territories in the East from 1941 on. Fritz Sauckel. Fritz Sauckel was born in 1894. He was Hitler's plenipotentiary for mobilization of labor from 1942 on, and as such was responsible for the more than 5 million men and women from the occupied territories who were forced to do labor in Germany. Horace Greeley Hallmar Schott. Horace Greeley Hallmar Schott was a banker who was born in 1877, served as president of the Reichsbank, and was Minister of Economics. From 1944 on, he had been imprisoned in the concentration camp at Flossenburg. Balder von Schirach was born in 1907 and served as head of the Ministry for Youth and after 1940 as the Gauleiter of Vienna. Alexander Seyss-Inquart. Alexander Seyss-Inquart was a lawyer. He was born in 1892 and served as the Commissioner for the Occupied Netherlands from 1940 through 1945. Albert Speer was an architect. He was born in 1905 and was the General Inspector for Buildings and Construction for Berlin from and after 1937, and from 1942 through 1945 served as Minister for Weapons and Munitions. Julius Streicher. Julius Streicher was an elementary teacher who was born in 1885. He founded in 1923 the virulently anti-Semitic weekly newspaper Der Stürmer. Even after his removal from the office of Gauleiter in Franconia in 1940, he remained as owner and publisher of that paper.
On August 29, 1946, the chief American prosecutor, Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson, comes forward for his final summation.
These men saw no evil, spoke none, and none was uttered in their presence. When we put all of their stories together, this is the ridiculous composite picture of Hitler's government that emerges. It was composed of a number 2 man who knew nothing of the excesses of the Gestapo which he created. A number 3 man who was merely an innocent middleman transmitting Hitler's orders without even reading them, like a postman or a delivery boy. A foreign minister who knew little of foreign affairs and nothing of foreign policy. A security chief who was of the impression that the policing functions of his Gestapo and SD were somewhat on the order of directing traffic. A party philosopher who was interested in historical research and had no idea of the violence which his philosophy was inciting in the 20th century. Now, this may seem like a fantastic exaggeration, but this is what you would actually be obliged to conclude if you were to acquit these defendants. If you were to say of these men that they are not guilty, it would be as true to say that there has been no war, that there are no slaves, that there has been no crime.
In 1946, after 315 days of trial, the sentences were pronounced.
Hermann Wilhelm Goering, on the counts of the indictment on which you have been convicted, the tribunal sentences you to death by hanging. Joachim von Ribbentrop, death by hanging. Fritz Saukel, death by hanging. Julius Streicher, death by hanging. Wilhelm Frick, death by hanging. Hans Frank, death by hanging. Alfred Rosenberg, death by hanging. Wilhelm Keitel, death by hanging. Ernst Kaltenbrunner, death by hanging.
Also sentenced to death were Jodl, Seyss Inquart, and Martin Bormann, who was tried in absentia. Hess, Funk, and Raeder got life prison terms. Speer, von Schirach, von Neurath, and Dönitz got long sentences. Fritsch, von Papen, and Schaack went free.